Hello folks, hope you're having a great day today. Today we'll take a look at, it's time for me to take a look at Elric, the series by Michael Moorcock. This is one of the most influential series in fantasy history. A lot of folks have, I think, you know, in the 70s, when I was born, or in the 80s, fantasy fans would have all read it. I do think a lot of fantasy fans today have heard of it, but have not necessarily read it. So I want to take a look at it. And what I want to do today is take a look at the first book. Well, it is kind of the first book, and it's kind of the first setting, but it's not the first thing that was written in the story. Elric of Melniboné. And so basically what happened was that Michael Moorcock was started off his writing, and he would write novels that were not necessarily as long as a novel would be. And his first set of things here, you can actually see it here in the table of contents. Here, I'll show you. This is a collection from White Wolf Publishing that was published in the early 2000s, and it republishes his stuff. And this is my copy of the first half or so of the stories, and here you can kind of see here, how one of these first ones are like 100 and some pages long. Great. And then you see how the Dreaming City and some of these other ones are like just 30 pages long and like super short. Because those were the ones that were first published. And they were published, they weren't even like novellas, they were more like, you know, a long short story or a novelette. And so you can go back, and when you're rereading some of those earlier ones, you can read them very quickly. But even his novels were more like 100 and some pages. They would not have a 2 or anything higher in front of their first number. They were 110, 125, those sorts of things. They were all small number of pages. So you could easily read one of these novels a day, which means you can knock out the Elric series in a day. You can read this collection I just showed you in a week without batting an eye. You can probably do it much more quickly than that. It has a number of novels, novellas, that sort of thing that are in there. So again, let's take a look at the first story, Elric of Melniboné. Now, he writes a number of these. His first one that he publishes is in the early 60s, called The Dreaming City. And he'll write a number of these smaller sort of vignettes in Elric after he's already up to it. The character's been developed. He's running around with Stormbringer and that sort of thing. But he wanted to write, once he'd gotten to he started writing when he was in his teens, so he's not going to write things that are that big and that long. But when he gotten to the point in the early 70s where he was able to publish novels, he's going to turn. And Elric of Melniboné is going to be the first novel in the series chronologically, and the first novel in the series. A proper, actual novel. Now again, 100 some pages long. It would not be a novel by modern standards. You can read it in a day. But again, you can kind of get a feel for it. So what you're going to do is, we're going to open up in Melniboné, and you're going to get a feel for who this Elric guy is. Now, Elric of Melniboné, I've talked about this once before. Elric of Melniboné is somebody who's going to be, he's the first anti-hero, and you're going to get a sense for that here. Moorcock has said he's never intended for him to be an anti-hero, and the Elric stuff is going to be a particularly dark series, and you'll get that here too in the first chapter, moving forward. And Moorcock himself has talked about how he sees Elric as this tragic figure, this tragic hero, kind of in the line of Lancelot, but he's not Lancelot in that sense. He was specifically created as the anti-Conan, the Barbarian, who you know, Conan and his sort of things were popular, and I think that's very important. My most recent video for you guys was Lynn Carter. And I took a look at how Lynn Carter had these love of these great writers like Robert E. Howard's Conan, like H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, and he'll write works that are kind of inspired by them, or, you know, Lord Dunsany in his Dreamland series. Edgar Rice Burroughs' Sword and Planets. I mean, he's got all these different pastiches, but his works don't go past the genres. He doesn't do anything new with them. He just kind of spins the wheels. But Moorcock is the exact opposite. Moorcock will always write against the trends of the day. You know, I talked about that in my Hawkmoon series, which I reviewed for you, where I pointed out that the bad guys were the Britons and the good guys were the Germans in this future place, set in this post-apocalyptic sort of science fantasy world. You know, here you're going to see the same thing. He's writing against the trends of the day where these big, giant, stout people. Elric is this tiny little guy who's barely kept alive and only survived because of herbs, potions, and later on his sword, which will give him the strength that he needs by draining the souls of others. So he's literally this tiny little magic guy. And he's very interesting as a character as a result. And he's much more fleshed out, I think, than a lot of those other Conan spin-offs. Conan himself is more fleshed out than those Conan spin-offs. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's go ahead and take a deep dive, though, a little bit of a deep dive. I don't want to spend too much time of your time with it because it's a shorter novel, so I'm not going to go like super deep into it. But what winds up happening, it's not a 500-page novel, and I'll go 100 pages, maybe 150 in, where I'm going to go just very shortly in. But you're going to be introduced to a courtroom scene. You're going to get a chance to feel from Melniboné proper. And what's going to end up happening is that Elric himself is going to be going through some definite depressions. He is the 428th, I believe, king of Melniboné, and so you're going to get introduced. The Melnibonéans, you're going to learn this very early on, are this ancient race of people that kind of are like evil elves, if you will. They're evil, they're decadent, they have been around for thousands and thousands of years, and they've been past their prime for thousands and thousands of years, and their empire has slowly shrunk until it was just its island, and then the empire on the island has slowly shrunk until it was just its capital, and that's where they're ruling from now. And so they have all this decadence. They just merely seek pleasure, as you'll see, and they're trying to entertain their king, and because he's going through some depression and trying to figure it out. You're going to be introduced to his main squeeze, his cousin, Kimoral, and she is loved by her brother, Urkun, and this was something that you would have seen absolutely during the era of the Roman Empire, which is, these guys are clearly a pastiche of, and were inspired by. You would have seen people, having feelings for their cousins, or their siblings. This would have been things that happened, then particularly in the more decadent times of the empire. And so it's kind of get that feel that this is in the last days of the Roman Empire, and their decadence is full of fun. But because their capital has been the center of trade for a long time, it remains so, or kind of like Byzantium after the rest of the empire had fallen, but Byzantium was still had endured and was still under the auspices of the kings there. Maybe something like that, although more decadence of Rome meets the last remnants in Byzantium, which was still the center of trade for the entire region. And so still bringing in the money, even though it had become just a glorious city-state, except in remembrance only, for about a good 50 years or so. So it also kind of evokes that too. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. They're going to take a deep dive into the culture, civilization, its torture, slavery, backstabbing aspects of it. And you're going to be in the love triangle of this guy, his cousin, and her brother. Urkun's going to become the main antagonist for the story. And then what's going to end up happening is that Urkun's going to try to take him out. And there's going to have, and I'll leave you to it, but a quest is going to happen, and he's going to find Stormbringer. Now you know that from the back cover, so I won't talk about that too long. But the idea is that by the time you're done with this, all the people are in their places for the main story. From somebody having a certain person having Stormbringer, Mournblade being its sister sword, has been introduced and brought over to the worlds. You're introduced to the world. The wandering has begun. You're going to be introduced to the Young Kingdoms. And all those things are going to happen, and all the characters are going to be in place by the end of the first novel. So that's kind of the idea, and it puts everybody in their place. So there you are. I'm going to leave you to it. My synopsis, I think, is already done. Michael Moorcock was a great writer. It's fast. You can read it very quickly. He can be a little bit of a heady writer at times. He's not the fastest read in the world, but he is, because he has so few pages, you can definitely knock out his books one a day, or even faster if you're really dedicated. I mean, you can sit down and read this novel in just a couple of hours, and if you're interested, you can read the next novel too. Although the next novel is written in '89, it's more of a modern novel in his sort of writing. But you get the idea. You can definitely knock these out very, very quickly in order to get launched into the series. But there you are. It's definitely the beginning of the anti-hero, the grim, dark fantasy hero. Now, I have talked about this in this next thing. This character is someone that lives today through dark fantasy, or through some other characters too. Like, for example, Drizzt Do'Urden, basically from R.A. Salvatore, the famous writer, the famous character, for example, is just Elric combined with Aragorn. He's a ranger, like Aragorn from... He just basically combined two archetypes. He combined the anti-hero from this evil race of people who's born with a conscience, like Elric, with the ranger, wilderness guy of Aragorn, and so he's basically combining the ranger archetype with the anti-hero, the person born with the conscience of a race of bad guys. And so you're going to have basically those two archetypes are going to be welded. That's all Drizzt Do'Urden is. He's not a new archetype. He's just two older archetypes being combined. But that was something that hadn't been done before to that level of popularity, and that's one of the reasons I think that Drizzt Do'Urden became to define a modern generation. He is just basically a happy Elric in a very real way. But he's brooding like Elric. He writes stuff like Elric. He writes diaries, journals, that sort of thing. He's definitely just brooding. He's just not a hero, an anti-hero. He's just a hero. But you get the idea. But Elric, on the other hand, has to make sacrifices. And we'll have to push back against his people, and we'll do so in a very different way. But there you are. That's Elric of Melniboné, published in '72. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. Have you read it or other works in the series? We'll do a couple more works in that series. I'm not going to do every single Elric book in the series, but I'll probably pick up a few here and there for you. And do them, knock them out for you here over the next little bit. But there you are. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to hit that subscribe button. There's going to be so many more of these reviews to follow. And hey, if you watch this video all the way to the end, I just want to thank you for taking some time out of your day. We all have such busy days, busy lives, and so many things happening. So the fact that you spent this time with me, that's very humbling, and I appreciate that. So have a good one.